Welcome to World of Marketing Podcast, a Foster Web Marketing production. Here's your host, Tom Foster.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World of Marketing, where I talk with industry leaders about marketing mindset and business growth. This episode is brought to you by Foster Web Marketing. Foster Web Marketing is dedicated to providing cutting-edge, highly customizable websites, marketing, video, and strategic solutions specifically designed for law firms, medical practices, and other professional service businesses. DSS, our award-winning web technology and marketing system that powers our website, sets us apart from everyone else. Please visit our website at Foster Web Marketing if you want to know more. But today is about our guest and my new friend, Sean Campbell. Sean is a well-regarded consultant, speaker, author, trainer, mentor, and educator. He has delivered talks for Fortune 50 companies and top-tier conferences around the world and has written extensively on technology and business topics. Sean has been a professional services firm owner for more than 20 years and is currently the CEO of Cascade Insights. His work has spanned consulting engagements with tech giants and startups you've heard of, the sale of his first company, and the growth of delivery, sales, marketing, and operational practices inside professional services firms. Sean specializes in helping organizations find success and opportunity in the B2B tech sector via market research insights, smart strategy, and powerful messaging. You can find more about his company at cascadeinsights.com. Well, Sean, welcome to the World of Marketing. Thank you so much, and it is great to meet you. Like I said, when we first got started, I was checking out your website, and I was so impressed with the cadre of companies that you've worked with. Wow, I'm very impressed. So tell me a little bit about you and a little bit about your background in your company.
Yeah, so I am a guy who's going to be a college professor who owns a business. That's the story. Like, I literally, we can go back that far if you want at some point, but it's actually somewhat relevant. So I want to mention it. Like, I mean,
yeah, that's great.
I was in my master's degree at the time, and I always wanted to be a college professor. I used to joke it probably made it hard to get dates. Hi, I'd like to be a college professor. It didn't really help, but like, or at least deflated the numbers maybe. So, but ended up meeting a lovely woman who's still my wife, obviously. And, along that path, as some young men do, I kind of said, I don't know if I want to starve. I kind of want to start a family. I'm not really sure what I want to do here. And so I ended up taking a job teaching people kind of technology. So like databases, networking, initially just like productivity applications. And so I kind of segued over to teaching, but more from like a technology standpoint, because I was kind of a little bit of a closet geek. I always had a computer in my room or whatever. And I didn't really know where that path was going to go. But then you flash forward a little farther, and I decided to become an independent trainer, which circa late 90s, there was a lot of that going on with Microsoft technology. Microsoft, I mean, brief PSA, like, there are a number of things to think about when it comes to like market dominance questions and all that kind of stuff. And that's not what this show is about. I'm not even qualified to judge those things. But one of the things that I think about when I think about that era and me working is like, Microsoft had 97% market dominance of computing. It's like if 97% of phones were iPhones and 3% were Android. I mean, it's hard to fathom, and I'm not judging it. But that leads to the next thing, which is that when I left an organization to go become an independent trainer, along with a couple other guys, and we built this small company as our first company, Microsoft became our first account because we just happened to be doing this kind of work with them from a marketing perspective for our current organization, and they let us continue to work with them. I use "let us" in quotes. There were some golden handcuffs involved there and a few things, but anyway, they basically let us do that. And so the very first account
you had Microsoft as your first account
as an entrepreneur was Microsoft in its ultimate era of dominance. Now I didn't plan this, right? The only thing I maybe had going in my
lucky favor, you.
Yeah, well, the only thing, well, and here's the thing. It's lucky and not lucky because, like, in all honesty, right, when you have that dominance, it's kind of like Boeing in its heyday in the aviation industry, right? There's a gravity that surrounds those companies so that, like, a number of people can end up working with them who maybe are great, not so great, whatever, right? Just because they have a million vendors, right?
Sure.
But to stay with that company, you usually have to be doing something right, clearly,
That's
right?
true.
And to be able to do that. And Microsoft's still an account 23 plus years later.
Wow,
So,
that is saying something.
yeah, so we didn't screw it up, at least. So, from that standpoint. But
That is fantastic. Congratulations.
yeah, it's been fun. And it's fun to work. It's fun to watch a company like that evolve.
And what do you
time.
do for them specifically? Can I ask that?
Oh, yeah. So generally speaking, what Cascade does, I say, is we either remove pain or we create opportunity. So we remove pain by actually doing research. Typically, I'll get into kind of what the asterisk is there, but the lion's share of what we do is research to kind of help somebody understand like their competitive landscape, or maybe they went to through a market launch that wasn't successful, or their sales efforts are poor, or their product isn't engineered right. And we'll help them understand how to make that better through talking to customers and prospects and even competitor customers. On the opportunity side, it's more like, I want to launch into a new country. I've just acquired a new organization. I want to figure out how we meld together. I have a brand new idea for a solution and I want to make sure it resonates. Those are the kinds of opportunity things we do. And the little asterisk is, and it's kind of increasingly more than one over the years, but like we started out as a research only firm, but over time, because our primary customer is a B2B marketer in a B2B technology company, we have over the years expanded so that we do a lot of marketing services on top of the research, but we're always a research first company, which makes us a little different, maybe exceedingly different, I would say, than
totally different. Because you're doing the research required to create the marketing campaigns. Most agencies are just...
And we partner, we don't have plans for world domination. Like we partner with plenty of agencies who are like, hey, can you guys go do the research, right? But like, because we're research first, I think we tend to enter it a little bit differently, like that the bulk of our engagements have a research component on the front end, and then we build a messaging framework, or then we build a buyer persona. And so the other benefit I think that it's given us over the years, precisely because we stayed in a lane, is that we just really know this buying dynamic in this space. I mean, like as one client said to us one time, like, you guys just didn't roll off a project on M&Ms, then go work on cloud services, and tomorrow you're going to go analyze cancer drugs. Now, and there's an argument to be made there. I'm not always against the broad-based firm, but if you ask me, the niche is the better place to be. I've had more success there. But yeah, that's basically us. That's who we are. About 12 people. Been around for 16
Now, look, okay, so like I'm looking at your website now. A few of our Cloudflare. Now we work with Cloudflare. Cloudflare is where we put all our websites, right? To protect them. So what do you do for Cloudflare?
Well, I can't ever really say specifically what I do for a company.
Can you give me generality?
The weird thing in my line of work on the research side is, and I'll unpack this if somebody's listening and be like, oh, he doesn't want to. No. Think about this for a minute. If I give you research insights, by definition, the minute you receive them, you have a degree of market advantage or competitive advantage.
100%.
And I unpack what those are to the broader world, I basically deflated your balloon. So what we do, this is kind of interesting. I'm going to segue this less about us just because it's, but I think it's to anybody running a services firm, they get this. It's super hard to develop a compelling case study because you can't really give away the barn and what you did. You're not a product company, and you don't usually get sign off precisely because of the dynamics I was talking about before, about like really deep metrics as to what you impacted. And so, and doubly hard with research because sometimes they're making the decision over a span of months to like put in place what we told them to do. So it takes a long time for something to come out. So, but I do feel like we just cracked the nut recently. I won't direct people to it because I don't want to make it sound self-promotional, but like, this is more just me sharing with other service promoters. Like if you're in that lane and you're like, how could I do it in a way that was anonymized, but I still felt like I was getting engagement? It was only just recently that, at least for us, I felt like I cracked the nut. I started putting out these like video case study versions that it's not the fact that they're video, like there's been video case studies forever, but just the way we're going about them seems to run exactly the right line of it's anonymized still, but it's like they're getting it. They're getting what we do. And I just say it's hard. I mean, this is we don't have to spend any more time on this, but I would say the anonymized case study, if you are trapped in writing those because of the dynamics of what you offer to the market, and that's the lion's share what you can do, it's very hard to get that tone right. And so it doesn't look like it's too thin, and it doesn't look like it's giving away the barn. So anyway, it's been fun to come up with that, which is part of, I think, having a business that I like, is that I mean, back to being a professor, like I had no idea that owning a business would be a never-ending series of ways to educate myself. I didn't
Right?
quite realize
always learning, always changing dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea. And then
outside dynamics changing you, inside your people, your staff, the world, everything. Yeah.
Right. Ultimately. And then the other side of it that I didn't really know, although I probably could have guessed it, but how self-aware are you as a 29-year-old person, right? At some level.
Right. 100%.
Like I'm 52 now, but like how self-aware was I at 29?
Right.
I don't really
I know. I started this gig when I was in my 30s. I'm 56 now. I've been doing
so pretty close. I started at 29. I'm going to be 53 in a week. So I get it. Like, it's like I look back and I'm like, a lot of those decisions weren't conscious. They were just kind of like what seemed like
you did what you had to do.
Right. And so like
the survival mode.
Totally. But if I look back, I'm like, I have always been, I didn't use this phrase back then, but like all the way back to when Father Boyvin in second grade is walking around me with my mother around, a story I heard later, and calling me the little professor. Wasn't because I was like punking everybody with knowledge. It's just I like to learn. And the stack of books I took into fifth grade, mercifully being teased a lot by it, and so I've been basically incapable of learning something and not wanting to teach somebody else it. Like all my hobbies are teaching. Like I love fishing, but what's the first thing I want to do? I want to get people on the boat and I want to teach them how to fish, and so like where that ties into business, which I didn't know at the time, is like, especially in services, I think it would have been less so in a product company if I'd gone that route. I'm pretty sure I would have felt a little different about it. But like in services, it's just there. It's there all the time. They're educating the clients, educating yourself, educating your staff. Like, not because I know everything, but because there's also like the other side. I'm just educating myself. I mean, I just get all this like.
Well, you have the ability to instruct the process to other people.
Totally.
To communicate that.
And I've always been, to paraphrase something I read recently that I thought was really powerful. And I don't necessarily know if this is I wouldn't call this a new idea, but I would say the fact that we're revisiting it is good. I'm a big history buff, so I have no problem with us circling back through an old idea. I just want us to recognize that it's an old idea first.
Right.
It's like, so, but I think that depends a little how old you are, but if you're willing to admit that, but that's a whole separate point. And so like, but, this article that was in HBR said, as if it was a brand new idea, was like, hey, we should stop managing people by asking them, what can I do to help you? And we should start managing people by saying, what do you need to be successful? And I have always been the latter anyway. And I think it just comes with teaching. If somebody comes to me with a problem, like a personal life on the boat, somebody's like, I'm not catching fish, and two other people are. I'm like, okay, let me look at what you're doing. Okay, do this, do that, try this, do this differently. Usually a couple hours later, they're catching more fish. And so I just think, I think that's the better way to fly. And anyway, there's more I could say about that. I'm really passionate about, ever more so as the years go by, like that happens to people, like just telling everybody to just teach more and mentor more and even, and we can unpack this if you want, like very much so read stuff you disagree with, especially as a business leader, because I think all of those things stop happening the longer you're a business leader. You stop teaching to some extent, you're just pontificating. You stop learning, you're just regurgitating. And at the same time, you don't really engage with things that you don't like at some point. And all of a sudden, you're dead. Not physically, but business-wise. And you're like, right. What the hell happened? And you're arguing with everybody about it. And the answer was obvious. You just stopped doing the activities you were doing when you were 20.
Right. Well, listen, what I appreciate about what you do is that most companies, when they do sales and marketing, they're like, I have this idea and I want to implement this to sell my product or service. I think this is what my people want. This is what my clients want. And then they go out and do what they think. Right? That's what most companies do. Most people, most entrepreneurs do. They do that. But what you do is you go out and actually do the research. And tell me if I'm right. You go out and actually let's find out actually what your real avatar clients, who are your perfect clients? What clients do you actually want? Let's find out actually what they're talking about. What are they asking about? What are they looking for? Let's do the research. Let's create the marketing campaigns around that instead of your imagination.
Sometimes we coyly say that as we deliver bad news to good people. Because there's people who are like good people who worked very hard and told themselves they understood their market and they understood what messages to send and they understood what to build. And they may be wrong on one or all three by the time we're done with the research, right? And
so Sean, this is a lead up for me. I'm raising my hand because I'm one of those people. Because I'm going to talk after this call. I'm talking to you, sir, because I believe that we could work together for real. Because here I am. I fancy myself a marketer. 25. I've been doing it my whole life, but you're doing something that I've never done, which is, I'm a creative marketer in that, here's my avatar client. Let me come up with things that I think that my avatar client will appreciate, right? Based on, right. But what you're doing is completely different. You're spinning that all around and you're finding out directly from the source. Well, let's find out directly from the source.
Well, and to be clear, I'm not discounting creative. Like even I said, and I know you're not saying that, but like, you can't take a spreadsheet and make it a campaign, right? There's an element of moving it over and juicing it and making it actually creative. I mean, that tagline doesn't, I can tell you, like,
but you're going to be able to say you need to market in this city block, not this city block.
Right. Like, I mean, I would never trust, apologies to the audience I'm going to mention, but maybe only so many. But like if we ran a focus group with IT professionals or cybersecurity professionals or developers, there's always a moment where a client tends to say, well, why don't we let them brainstorm for a bit? I'm like, no. You don't want these people to brainstorm your tagline. What you want is you want them to react to stuff and you want them to get in the weeds and talk about it. But if you, because it always the same thing. I mean, you get that audience like, well, what do you think they should use? Or it's the worst tagline ever imaginable, right? I mean, so like, it's not like the creative juice isn't important. I just feel like ultimately, you just have to start with some foundational knowledge. And the funny thing for me about this is, again, it's a little bit of a weird full circle thing for me on the professional thing. Like, I was originally an ENFP on every Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENFJ now, which I attest to being a business owner. Eventually the P switches over.
What is that? An ENFP? What is that?
Oh, Myers-Briggs. I'm sure some of the listeners know. It's
okay. Probably I just don't know.
No, it's fine. Like Myers-Briggs is one of these personality tests.
Right. I'm familiar with it, but I don't know.
Myers-Briggs is like, extroverted, intuitive,
oh, right. Okay. Yes.
Perceiving,
right.
Right. And I turned into an ENFJ the longer I owned a business, because I think ultimately a business, there's an element where you become a little more lawyer than counselor because you have to if you're the head of it. Like ultimately you have to decide, right? You listen and you take in the perspectives. I was counseling an employee about this not that long ago at some point. I was basically saying, there's an evolution you have to go through in consulting in some ways where you have to reach a point where I want to say this appropriately because I'm talking about an employee, where you have to kind of separate yourself a little bit from the churn of it and get a little bit of, emotional separation from the client's needs a bit. And, but anyway, long and short of it, where I was trying to go with that is that like, I started out as somebody who was very creative. My bachelor's degree was radio and television production. I mean, I was all on the creative side, but I wanted to be a professor, which I knew eventually would lead me to things that were more data oriented. But I saw that as like a secondary artifact of being able to teach and go do other things. Well, now you take it all the way full circle. Now I run a company that's got a quant practice and does qualitative research and all this other stuff. I mean, so it's just funny how the wheel spins a little bit, sometimes in life. And all of that to say, I always say this is a PSA whenever I do an interview. If anybody ever wants me to guest lecture, I'm always happy to stand in front of a room full of college students, virtually or otherwise. But I don't have the time to actually do a professorial stint. I did do it for a few years when my kids were young, and then I just kind of ran out of time.
Well, who are some of your mentors? Who are some of yours?
I don't get that question enough to be super prepared, to be honest. Let me think about that. It's a good question. I mean, in terms of business mentors, I mean, here's the thing for me. The easiest way to answer that is, for me, I'm such an avid reader that to me, I've got probably a weird mix of people I've never met that I think are really big mentors because I read a lot. And at the same time, I've got people that I've known in life who obviously mentored me. So my dad's clearly one. I mean, he did he's now passed, but he did small group health insurance in the era of Glenn Glary, Glenn Ross, winner gets a car, second gets steak knives, third gets fired, and all cold calling, all whatever. And where he mentored me wasn't the kind of selling I do is completely different, massively long sales cycles, massively, relationship building. But he taught me a lot of things about the power of being really accurate and clear and truthful in a sales conversation, and many other things that I could get into. And he maybe gave me a little bit of a gift of Irish Scottish gab, I guess. There's probably some of that too that I could probably thank him for. But but there's some of that for sure. My wife's obviously been a huge influence and a source of just stability through the years. I mean, anybody who owns a business knows that it's kind of an ego creation deflation factory till you get that under control in your later years. And, you go up and down sometimes with the business when you're young, and eventually you figure out a way to level that, or some do, some don't, but you try to figure out a way to level that. And I'm not perfect with it either. But much less, she's always worked in the business and from an accounting and HR standpoint, and has always been great. I will also say my faith's been huge for me, which wasn't as much present in my first business. And I wish it was, because I feel like my identity in my first business was so tied to whether it did well or poorly. And it's not the same. I mean, I want to succeed and I want to do well and I want to do well for my people. But at the same time, I'm not so wrapped around that like I used to be. And that's because I've got a faith in something that's greater than me. From a historical standpoint, people that I end up quoting a lot, from the near to the far, David Maister is a guy that I've always loved. Fantastic guy, long retired, wrote a book called Managing the Professional Services Firm, which, if you ignore the parts about digital marketing, which are obviously now dated, everything else about it is absolutely on point. I mean, you could run that playbook today in terms of, especially the chapter on effective delegation and all this stuff. I mean, it's spot on positioning in a lot of ways. I mean, he couldn't have foreseen internet-based companies, but even so, a lot of it there's really good. I tend to quote Churchill a fair amount. Don't really know why. Partly because he's
that's cool.
Quotable. And lately, one of my bigger influences has been U.S. presidents, but for reasons that might be slightly obscure unless I explained it. So when this probably also is a little bit of an indication of how I try to solve problems sometimes. So let's just say the last election in the U.S. led to disagreements. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I just don't want to go there. Okay. So it led to disagreements. I walked away from that thinking, how could I be a better, and again, I'm speaking for me, a better citizen for me by the time we get around to the next election? And I was like, I'm going to read a biography on every president. Now, I wasn't entirely sure if I would get it done. I mean, I know me, I thought I'll probably get it done. And then people around me were a little bit like, great, you made it to Jefferson. You got a long way to go. We'll see if you make it. Well, I'm nearly done with Johnson, so I think I'm going to finish.
Wow.
And so and And that's been
wow,
really, and
that's impressive.
That's taken about 2.5 years because I read other stuff in between, but I pretty much always had one biography on the bedstand next to whatever else I was reading. And so I've been just making my way through it. And some of them have been snoozers, let's be honest. And some of them have been compelling, and some of them have been way more compelling than I would have thought. But there's a lot of things you learn about the human character from reading biographies.
Yes.
That's probably more biographies of any era or area than I ever have read or maybe ever will read.
I read the John Adams biography. I thought that was very good.
That was very good. The Jefferson biography was good. Washington was good. I can list out ones later that I thought were good too. Hoover was surprisingly good, that biography. You wouldn't think it. And so I learned a lot. Do you have
kids, Sean? Do you have kids?
Oh yeah. Yeah. 2 kids. One's 20 and one's 18.
Okay.
So lots of discussions about, what they want to do for a living, which I'm completely happy to engage in, but they're absolutely at that stage.
Very good.
Of life. But yeah. So those are, those are
that's very impressive.
Well, I don't know if it's, here's the thing. I don't even want you to call it impressive. No offense. What I just want to say is I just want to inspire people to and it's not just read. Watch a podcast, go watch a bunch of Amazon Prime movies on the subject. I don't really care. But when you're facing something you don't understand, there are so many places that you can go that wouldn't teach you squat. And I would just say, go to some place where you can learn. And here's the thing. That journey, I think, is indicative of a few things for me. Is that clearly I didn't agree with the views of all those presidents. Right.
Sure.
Let's be honest. It wouldn't be too hard to find one if you go far enough back that there's lots of things you can disagree with. Right. But but I'm gonna try to understand the person. I'm gonna try to understand where they came from. I'm gonna walk away from it with my own set of opinions, and I'm gonna move on to the next. And it's kind of how I tackle a lot of things. And I don't know. I've just learned my way out of a lot of problems, I guess. And some I haven't, but to me, that's the biggest skill I could ever give anybody. All the way back to when my kids were 2 at the mall, and they would be like, hey, I want to go get X. And I would be like, well, why don't you walk over there and I'll tell you what to go do. And you go walk over and ask. And that was just the kind of parent I was. It doesn't mean I was a good parent or bad parent. In the earliest days, I was like, your way to get more out of life is to ask of it and go learn. Right. And that's the way we've always
great advice. So you've sold your first company, right? Was it doing the same thing?
Well, kind of. To someone not in my lane, I'll explain it in 30 seconds and they might go, that sounds kind of similar. And I guess from the outside, it's probably close. For me, it looks kind of different. So the first company did a lot of what was called tech evangelism back in the day. So we did very deep technical marketing, but we didn't have a research component. And we mostly did it for Microsoft and Intel, which was kind of its own journey in of itself, because it was wonderful to work with 2 large tech companies. It was also terrifying to only have 2 large companies as your accounts. Sure. And we had a smattering of other stuff. And that's one of the reasons when I started Cascade, I said, never, ever, ever, ever again. I will not let any company here get above X percentage. That percentage is up to me to decide, but it's really low. And I just won't let it happen. I'm just like, we're going to go invest in marketing, or it's not time to grow or whatever, because that thing that happens to a lot of business owners where you're telling yourself you've got a diverse pipe, but realistically there's 3 people in your CRM that if they just tell you to pound sand, you're basically out of water, or you got to fire half the people. You see that so many times in services firms. And I think there's ways out of that, but that I certainly feel I can talk to folks about, but I just would caution people not to do that. And so anyway, that's what the first company did. Lots of tech evangelism. We used to say we were technical guys who knew enough marketing to be dangerous back then. We were doing really, really in-depth product demos and, field engagement stuff and things like that. So there's kind of a genetic similarity in a way, but it's different because we didn't have the research component and we didn't lead with research. That came with the second company.
Okay. And how long has the second Cascade been around?
Since 2006.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've been doing this a while.
Yeah. The first company ran from like 2000 to 2006. And then there was a short break. And then we launched the second company. And then that's been running ever since. So I haven't quite made 25 years. So as an entrepreneur. So I'm hoping to, obviously.
And is your plan to sell this company?
No, the first company I sold because, well, okay, let me unpack that. No, there's no plans. On the other hand, in all intellectual honesty, like a fractional CFO we had for a while said at one point, there's only so many ways a business ends. You either run it into the ground, you kind of just let it fade to black. You're like the solopreneur and nobody wants it and it just fades, or you sell it. And if you have even a moderately going concern when it comes to retirement, someone will want to buy your pipeline, client list, the infrastructure you have. So I mean, this is me just being.
But isn't it your brain? Isn't it?
No. But it's. I just want to be straight up about it. Like I always feel like some people are like, I'm never going to sell. I'm like, well, you don't really know that. But like I think ultimately maybe someday, but that's way down the line. The first company I sold just because my kids were young. I kind of a big churn at the time. My first business partner had left a couple years prior for reasons I don't need to get into. They're kind of his. And there was a lot going on. And I said, I'd like to get out of this kind of business. And then within 6 months, I was like, gosh, I really like being a business owner. What's the other thing I could start? And then I started this with a very different perspective.
So what are some of the daily rituals that keep you going?
Well, it's
like, what do you do for fun?
Okay. Well, those are two slightly different questions, but like, I would say, sorry, that was the researcher in me. I don't have to be that precise. Is that, I answered the first question, but the first question, I was like, well, that's focus group question 1 and 2. No. And so, anyway, on the first one, exercise didn't used to be, apologies to those of you who grew up in the Midwest like me, but that's not an area of the country where exercise is predominant. And just having known that. And so like Northwest, it's like everybody's doing some form of exercise, it seems. So like I got into that a lot more, partly to be healthy. I always read, some of that's the Bible, to be honest, in the morning. Like I said, my faith's kind of big to me. On a lot of reasons, I will, so kind of a fairly daily ritual with that. One of the beautiful things about work from home, even when our kids are 20 and 18, we gather for lunch a lot of days. That's a huge thing to me. I know people have very strong opinions about offices, not offices. The offices I'm talking to you from are literally just slightly down the hill here on this 1 acre lot from the main house. And like, I will go up there and have lunch with my kids. And I think that's the biggest blessing I've ever been able to give me
good for you.
over 20 years. Now, I haven't always been around. I had to travel some at different points in my career and stuff like that. But I was still home around those travel days. So that's definitely a ritual, like popping up there, like, who's here for lunch? And that's a big deal. And fishing, absolutely fishing when it's warm out. It's the most peaceful place I can be. In some ways, I could do, this would probably frighten you and the listeners. I could probably do 29 podcast episodes on the glories of fishing, but we won't go there right now.
Wow. Some people what kind of fishing?
Is dead. I'll try to catch anything. I mean, like around here, in Oregon, the species that are like, at least for me that I target, are more like bass and trout and salmon with some other things thrown in, but that's kind of what I go after. And so fishing's definitely a super peaceful place for me to be. And then what was your second question? You had rituals, and then you had,
what do you do for fun? But you go fishing.
That's a segue. There you go. So
right.
The other one, and then in the winter it's skiing. And then we do a lot of camp, but ski. Yeah, I kind of have fishing and camping season, which then becomes skiing season. And is anybody thinking that through long enough? It's like, well, it sounds like there's some similarities there, like a little bit of like peaceful solitude mixed in with the ability to have companionship, but at the same time, you're not really like competing with a team, but you're kind of competing. Yeah, I mean, go figure. And my favorite sport's baseball, which has also some similarities to the other two, if you think about it. Never good enough to be a player, but I coached my kids' teams and stuff like that.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's how it goes.
What is the craziest thing you've ever done, Sean?
Well, so that's a tough one. Not because I can't think of things, but I have a recency bias. But I'll say it because it definitely feels like the craziest thing, but that also feels like recency bias. So my kid is going to graduate from high school a year or two before he says, my bucket list is I want to jump out of a plane. Well, when your 16-year-old says I want to jump out of a plane, you're like, well, let's see if you ask about it in a few months, much less mom doesn't want him to ask about it ever again. So a year later, he says, I still want to jump out of a plane. Okay, so 2 months before graduation, he's like, best thing for a graduation gift is jumping out of a plane. And so mom now is like, crap, okay, he does want to actually jump out of a plane. And so anyway, on July 4th, actually, we jumped out of a plane. And so me and him. And so that was like super cool. Would I have done it without him suggesting it? I mean, would I have said no forever? No, but it wasn't high up on the list, right? But I was like, if you're going, can I go? And he's like, yeah. And so, and I could talk you through that experience, but
that's great
podcast. But it was definitely. I will say this. I think skydiving is safe, so I don't know if I'd call it crazy, but I could tell you that the gap between for yourself when you're on the plane for your first jump of like, oh my God, did I really sign up to do this? Like, I mean, that delta, that's the biggest I've ever had. I mean, I've gone down hills very fast. I've taken the boat fast. I've gone to places on planet Earth that seem less than safe. But no, nothing had a bigger gap of like that kind of, oh my God, what have I put myself into?
Right. Like you're up in the plane, now you're like, this is about to happen. What?
Right. I'm not chickening out now. I'm not going to do that.
Right. But what have I done? The guy across from
me was like a bucket of sweat. I wasn't as bad as him, but yeah. But it was fun. I would highly recommend it. Absolutely highly recommend it. Once you get through the first 3.5 seconds or maybe less of just, then it's actually okay. Then it was actually like super fun.
Yeah. Well, that is a great, crazy thing. I don't know if I'm up for that. I actually always wanted to be a pilot. That was the thing I wanted to do. And I joined the Marines to be a pilot. And then I ended up going into communications and IT. Never was a pilot. I tried to get took pilot classes a couple of years ago and found that I was terrified up there in that little plane. And I was like, I'm not doing this. So I had a boat at the time and I was like, a boat's a lot safer than the plane. And this boat is so damn expensive. I'm not going to have a plane and a boat, blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
No, I get it. Yeah. It's funny for me with heights. I mean, for heights, for me, this is just a quick aside. Like, I co-built our house with my father-in-law. Now, keep in mind, I had just had son-in-law jobs. I mean, he just told me where to dig and when to nail. Like I'm not claiming any like actual responsibility, but I did what I needed to do. But like, I will get more nervous on 9-foot studs standing over concrete than I ever get nervous in a plane, or even when I fell out of the plane. The only reason I was nervous, I think, is just all the like noise and, oh my God, I'm out of the plane.
Sure.
And, like, you're falling. But like literally, I don't remember thinking even once all the way down, like, wow, the ground's really far down. Like, I mean, so my fear of heights has this weird, like 30 feet and under problem. I don't think I'm bothered up. But low down, it seems to freak me out a little more. Maybe I got bad balance. I don't know. But
I don't know what my deal is. And I'm like determined to try it again. We'll see. Well, Sean, it has been great to know you, to meet you. You're quite the character, and you've done so much. And I appreciate you being on the World of Marketing.
Well, thank you for having me on. Appreciate your questions, and best of luck to you with the show.
And Sean's website is Cascade Insights if you want to talk to him about B2B. marketing research, I'm certainly going to talk to the man. I'm very interested in this. So everybody, thank you so much. Signing off. It's been Sean Campbell and Tom Foster on the World of Marketing. You guys have yourself a great day.